There's a specific kind of stillness that some people maintain, while the world rushes past them, chasing whatever's popular this week. It doesn't announce itself with judgment or superiority or loud declarations about being different. It lives in the quiet choice to keep wearing the same style when everyone else has moved on, in scrolling past whatever challenge is dominating social media without feeling the pull to participate, in watching trends cycle through their predictable arc from exciting to ubiquitous to embarrassing without ever stepping into that current. Maybe you know someone who exists outside the cultural momentum. Maybe it's you, that person who seems somehow insulated from the gravitational pull of whatever everyone else is suddenly doing, buying, watching, or caring about. Most people think avoiding trends means being contrarian, deliberately choosing the opposite of popular just to be difficult or prove something. But psychology tells a very different story. For most people who never join trends, the resistance isn't about wanting to be different or needing to stand out. It's about something quieter and more fundamental, a disconnection between what captures collective attention and what actually resonates with their internal sense of what matters. The avoidance doesn't come from judging people who follow trends. It comes from a genuinely different relationship with novelty, with social proof, with the implicit pressure to participate in shared cultural moments just because they're happening. The distance from trends isn't rebellion, it's indifference, the kind that runs so deep it doesn't require effort or thought to maintain. Here's the part that makes trend-conscious people uncomfortable. People who never join trends aren't missing out or failing to engage with culture, or somehow less connected to what's happening in the world. They're often deeply engaged, just selectively, according to criteria that have nothing to do with what's popular and everything to do with what genuinely interests them independent of social momentum. They stayed open to new things for as long as it made sense. They tried participating, bought the thing everyone was buying, watched the show everyone was watching, used the phrase everyone was using, and every time they joined something just because it was trending, they learned the same hollow lesson: that following trends because they're trends doesn't actually lead to satisfaction, discovery, or connection. It leads to temporary participation in something that stops mattering the moment the next trend arrives. And what's fascinating is that the brain does not process trend resistance as social deviance. For people with this temperament, it processes mass adoption as a signal that something has become less interesting, not more. Psychological research on personality shows that some people, particularly those high in trait openness combined with low conformity needs, experience genuine aversion to things that become too popular too quickly. It's not conscious snobbery. It's an automatic response where widespread adoption actually decreases rather than increases appeal. This isn't contrarianism for its own sake. This is a different relationship with novelty and social proof. The human motivation system comes in different configurations. Some people are energized by being part of collective experiences, by shared cultural moments, by the feeling of being in on what everyone's talking about. Others are energized by discovering things independently, by experiences that feel personal rather than communal, by the sense that what they're engaging with chose them rather than them choosing it because everyone else already did. This is why people who avoid trends often say something that sounds paradoxical to trend followers. I'm interested in new things. I just lose interest when everyone else gets interested. Not because they need to feel special or superior, but because the internal experience of engaging with something shifts fundamentally when it goes from personal discovery to mass phenomenon. The appeal genuinely disappears, not through conscious choice, but through automatic psychological process. That shift doesn't mean they're pretentious. It means their interest is calibrated to qualities that mass popularity tends to erase: specificity, uniqueness, the feeling of having found something, rather than having something found for you by algorithm and social consensus. Psychologists describe this as need for uniqueness or counterconformity, but those terms don't quite capture the lived experience. It's not about needing to be different. It's about being constitutionally unresponsive to social proof as a reason to care about something. The mind isn't trying to be difficult by resisting trends. It's operating according to different values where popularity actively signals qualities they're trying to avoid. Oversaturation, commercialization, the transformation of something potentially interesting into something optimized for mass appeal. And here's where the misunderstanding deepens, where judgment from trend participating people becomes most intense. Following trends is supposed to be how you stay relevant, right? That's what culture suggests. That if you're not engaging with what's current, you're out of touch, boring, missing the conversation, failing to participate in the shared experiences that create connection. But for people genuinely uninterested in trends, relevance defined by keeping up with what's popular feels hollow, like performing a version of engagement that has nothing to do with actual interest or curiosity or genuine connection to the material. Many people who avoid trends don't actually want to be isolated from culture. That's not their goal. They want engagement with things that feel meaningful, independent of their popularity status. They want to discover things through genuine interest rather than through algorithmic recommendation of what's trending. They want conversations about substance rather than about who's seen the latest thing everyone's supposed to have seen. They want relationships where connection isn't dependent on shared participation in whatever's currently capturing collective attention. And when modern culture increasingly organises itself around trending content, around shared participation in viral moments, around the assumption that being part of the conversation means knowing and caring about whatever happens to be popular this week, something becomes clear. The culture of trends isn't designed for people who don't find trends inherently compelling. At first, people who don't naturally follow trends try to adapt. Maybe I should care about this. Maybe I'm missing something by not participating. Maybe staying current is just part of existing in the world and I need to make more effort. Then they try selective participation. Maybe I can just follow trends in areas that actually interest me. Maybe I can engage with the trends that seem substantive and ignore the rest. Then they try accepting the disconnection. Maybe it's okay that I don't know what everyone's talking about. Maybe relevance doesn't actually require being up to date on everything trending. And finally, after enough experiences of feeling genuinely disinterested in things everyone else seems excited about, they stop questioning whether something's wrong with them and accept that they're simply wired differently. This is just how I engage with culture. What's rarely discussed is how isolating that can feel. Because not following trends doesn't mean not noticing that you're outside shared experiences everyone else is having. You still see the references you don't understand. You still sit through conversations about things you haven't engaged with. You still get the subtle message that you're somehow less connected, less current, less part of what's happening, because you're not participating in the collective attention economy. The choice to opt out isn't costless. It creates genuine social friction. It means watching people bond over shared trending experiences while you remain outside that bonding. It means being seen as the person who's always behind or out of touch, when actually, you're just uninterested in most of what captures mass attention. Psychologically, this is called cultural non-conformity or autonomous functioning. But those terms don't capture what it actually feels like. The strange loneliness of being surrounded by excited conversation about something that leaves you completely cold. The quiet alienation of watching trend after trend capture everyone's attention while you remain unmoved. The wondering whether something is genuinely wrong with you, that you don't feel the pull to participate that everyone else seems to feel. Not because the trends themselves matter, but because the inability to care about them creates disconnection from people you otherwise feel connected to, because humans are wired to believe that sharing popular experiences creates belonging. From a young age, most people learn that knowing what's popular, participating in what everyone else is doing, signals that you're part of the group, that being current means being connected, that following trends is how you prove you're engaged with the world rather than disconnected from it. So when someone consistently doesn't follow trends, even when those trends dominate conversation, their mind often asks a version of the same question. Am I being unnecessarily difficult? Am I making connection harder than it needs to be? Should I just participate even though I don't care, just to have the shared reference points that make social interaction easier? And that question carries weight because the answer isn't obvious. Maybe both things are true. Maybe your disinterest in trends is genuine and creates unnecessary social friction. Maybe honouring that disinterest is authentic and creates isolation. Maybe there's no clean resolution between being true to how you're actually wired and navigating a world that increasingly assumes everyone is tracking and caring about the same trending content. This is where the internal experience becomes complex, because on one side, there's the integrity of only engaging with things you actually find compelling, the freedom of not feeling obligated to care about whatever's popular, the pleasure of discovering things on your own timeline according to your own interest, rather than because everyone else is already talking about it. And on the other side, there's the cost of that autonomy, the social disconnection, the moments where you can't contribute to conversations that everyone else is having, the accumulation of small moments where your lack of engagement with trends registers as lack of engagement with people. Studies on conformity and social connection show something important. People who don't follow trends often have fewer but deeper relationships. They connect with others through sustained shared interests rather than through participation in passing cultural moments. But knowing that doesn't make the disconnection from trend-based bonding feel less lonely in the moment. Understanding that your way of engaging leads to different kinds of connection doesn't eliminate the exclusion from the connections that trends create. The mind knows that authentic interest matters more than performed participation, but social situations where everyone's discussing the trending thing and you have nothing to contribute still feel alienating regardless of whether your non-participation is principled. But here's the psychological truth that doesn't get enough attention. People who don't follow trends aren't resisting them through effort. They're simply not compelled by them. The resistance isn't active, it's passive. It's the absence of the pull that others feel. They're not working hard to be different. They're being authentic to an interest pattern that genuinely doesn't include following things just because other people are. The indifference is real, not performed. And that authentic indifference is actually harder to maintain in a trend-driven culture than active contrarianism would be. Because contrarians at least acknowledge the trend as significant enough to oppose. People genuinely uninterested in trends don't even have that relationship to it. They're not against the trend. They're just completely unmoved by it, which creates a kind of social friction that's hard to explain. How do you communicate to people that you're not judging their interest in something, you're just genuinely uninterested yourself, without it sounding like judgment anyway? The final acceptance of being someone who doesn't follow trends often comes not after one frustrating social moment, but after a quieter realization. My interest doesn't work like other people's interest. I'm not going to suddenly start caring about things because they're popular. And trying to force that just creates exhaustion without creating genuine engagement or connection. That realization isn't liberating, it's limiting. Because it means accepting that certain kinds of social bonding simply aren't available to you. Not because you're incapable of them, but because you're unwilling to perform the participation they require. And awareness of that limitation changes how you approach culture and relationships. Research shows that people who don't follow trends often develop rich interests in areas that remain niche, that never achieve mass popularity. They become deeply knowledgeable about things that most people never encounter. They cultivate expertise and passion in domains that exist outside trending conversations. So their relationship with culture becomes idiosyncratic, personal, impossible to summarize in ways that create immediate connection with people operating in mainstream trending spaces. Another misunderstood aspect is this. People assume avoiding trends means being stuck in the past, attached to what was popular during your formative years, resistant to new things. In reality, it often means the opposite. It means being interested in new things constantly, just not the new things everyone else is interested in. It means having curiosity that operates independently of social proof. The people who never follow trends are often discovering constantly, just not discovering what's trending. They're finding artists before they become popular, reading books that never make bestseller lists, exploring ideas that don't have viral moment, engaging with culture through paths that don't intersect with whatever's capturing mass attention. As children, many people who become trend-resistant as adults had early experiences that shaped this pattern. Maybe they tried to like popular things and genuinely couldn't connect to them. Maybe they felt the pressure to conform and developed resistance to that pressure. Maybe they discovered that their actual interests were always slightly adjacent to what was mainstream and learned to trust that adjacency rather than fight it. As adults, they carry forward this pattern of engaging with culture through personal interest rather than social consensus. And naming that pattern doesn't change it. Understanding where the resistance comes from doesn't suddenly make trends appealing. What was once a response to social pressure becomes integrated into identity, becomes how they navigate everything. That integration is both powerful and isolating, because once you've learned to trust your own interest independent of popularity, you can't simply decide to start caring about things because other people care about them. The mechanism that creates trend following just doesn't activate the same way, and that creates an impossible situation. You want connection, but you can't make yourself interested in the things that create easy connection. You value authenticity, but authenticity keeps you outside shared experiences. Neither option feels fully satisfying. Following trends feels inauthentic. Avoiding them feels isolating. Here's something rarely acknowledged. People who don't follow trends often have unusual and interesting perspectives, precisely because they're not consuming the same content as everyone else. They're not thinking about problems through the same frameworks. They're not repeating the same takes that have already been articulated 1,000 times. They bring fresh perspective because their inputs are different, which sounds like a strength, and, in some contexts, it is. But it's also alienating, because fresh perspective that doesn't connect to what everyone else already knows often registers as irrelevant rather than as insight. The value of thinking differently only matters if people can bridge the gap to understand what you're thinking. And when that gap gets too wide, when your reference points are too far outside what's trending and familiar, your perspective stops landing no matter how interesting it might be. The capacity for independent thinking that makes someone potentially valuable also makes them hard to communicate with when they're not operating from shared cultural references. And that capacity doesn't disappear when someone recognizes its cost. It just becomes something they have to manage, something they learn to translate when possible, something they accept will create permanent distance from people who need shared, trending references to feel connected. From a psychological standpoint, this is called cognitive independence or low susceptibility to social influence. The mind structures itself around internal rather than external validation of what's worth attending to. And interestingly, people who don't follow trends often have stability in their interests that trend followers don't. They're still interested in the same things years later because their interest wasn't dependent on popularity. They develop deep knowledge because they stay engaged past the point where trends move on. Not more committed, just differently motivated. Their engagement doesn't require the fuel of other people's attention. It's self-sustaining in ways that trend-based interest isn't. But there is one part of being trend resistant that can be genuinely difficult. The assumptions people make about why you're not participating, that you think you're too good for popular things, that you're trying to be difficult or contrarian, that you're judging people who do follow trends, even when none of that is true, even when you genuinely don't care what other people engage with and just want the same freedom for yourself. The choice to opt out of trends reads a statement to people who are participating. And managing those assumptions becomes exhausting. Having to explain over and over that you're not against the thing, you're just not interested. And watching people interpret your disinterest as disguised superiority no matter how you frame it. So people who avoid trends sometimes just stop explaining. They let people think whatever they think. They accept being seen as the person who's always behind or deliberately difficult or unnecessarily contrarian. Because the alternative, constantly justifying why you're not participating in whatever's popular, creates more friction than just accepting the misunderstanding. And sometimes they wonder if maybe everyone else is right, if maybe there is something wrong with being so consistently unmoved by things that move everyone else. But psychology suggests something different. Sometimes being trend resistant isn't about being better or worse. It's about having different circuitry for what captures attention and generates interest. Not every brain responds to social proof the same way. Not every person finds value in shared cultural moments. And recognizing that difference doesn't make anyone superior or deficient. It makes them different. People engage with culture through different mechanisms. They find meaning in different kinds of experiences. They connect through different reference points. And sometimes those differences are significant enough that trying to bridge them creates more effort than the connection is worth. There is a myth that staying current with trends is necessary for being culturally engaged. That if you're not following what's popular, you're not really participating in culture. But engagement means different things to different people. For some, it means being part of collective experiences, riding waves of trending attention, sharing viral moments. For others, it means deep dives into niche interests, sustained engagement with things that never trend, discovery that happens on personal timelines rather than algorithmic ones. Neither approach is more valid. They're just different. And the culture we've built increasingly assumes everyone operates according to the first model, which makes people operating according to the second model feel increasingly alien and disconnected, even when they're deeply engaged with culture, just not the trending parts of it. The psychology of people who never join trends is not about superiority. It's about different wiring for what generates interest. The wiring that makes popularity a neutral or negative signal rather than a positive one. The wiring that makes social proof irrelevant to whether something deserves attention. The wiring that creates interest through idiosyncratic personal resonance rather than through collective momentum. And perhaps the most important truth is this: most people who don't follow trends didn't choose to be this way. They tried to care about popular things. They wanted to feel the excitement everyone else felt about whatever was trending, but the excitement just didn't come. Disinterest wasn't a decision, it was a discovery about how they're built. And that discovery, once made, shapes everything. Quieter than the cultural conversation, more isolated than it needs to be, not chosen but discovered, not superior but different, not wrong, just operating according to different criteria for what deserves attention in a world with infinite things competing for it.